if we want people to stay, and businesses don't want big turnarounds of their staff and they want team that care, then you need to care about them first. And I think that's been such a gap.
There are so many aspects to running a restaurant, so many decisions to make. But I think perhaps one of the most important ones for longevity is the atmosphere that you want to create for your staff. We are heading to Brisbane today to talk to Adrienne Jory. She has the very delightful Bar Francine. Adrienne, welcome to Dirty Linen.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's really good to have you on the show. I don't even know if you know that I came to Bar Francine when I was in Brisbane a couple of months ago.
Yes, because my best friend, Victoria, lives in Melbourne, and her friend messaged and was like, holy crap, do you know who is at your friend's restaurant? And I get this frantic just notification, ping, 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 ping on my phone. And I'm just like, what is wrong? And like, I messaged her, I was like, babe, what is wrong with you? What has happened? Is something wrong? Do I need to leave work urgently? She's like, no, do you know who's in your restaurant? I was like, I don't know. There's lots of people in the restaurant. Who are you talking about? She's like, Dani Valent's in your restaurant. I was like, oh, very excited.
Oh.
Yes, I kind of found out after you left and I saw you and I was like, you look so familiar. Who are you? And then it all clicked.
Wow. Well, that is a much more dramatic answer than I was expecting. I am somewhat embarrassed, but I have to tell you that I loved it so much. And then I did a little wrap-up of my Brisbane adventure and raved about you guys. So I don't know if you heard that.
Yes, I heard it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so it would prove that I was really there. So for people who don't know Bar Francine, give us a little lowdown on the experience.
Yeah, so Bar Francine is our little wine bar in West End in Brisbane. We took over 100-year-old house and converted it into what is now Bar Francine, which is a wine bar. And originally when we had taken it over, it's had a lot of history in it. So it was a plant shop, it was a cafe, it was the start of box vintage, and then it in its very, very early days was a milk bar. And so kind of as we were renovating and kind of conceptualising the vision for Franny, we started to uncover all of these little hidden gems, and we managed to restore the tiles that were back from its original era of a milk bar in the 60s. And just really, it looks like a house when you walk in, and it's very homey and very cozy. It's a bit rickety, and there's a lot of little happy imperfections that are through it, but it's definitely a place to kind of lean back, have a wine, eat something very yummy, and just have that very homey style service that's very comfortable and hyper friendly.
It's so well described. I would say that completely maps onto my experience. Tell us about the style of food.
Yeah, so Brad he's so talented and was our favourite chef in a lot of venues that he had been in, and particularly at one at a breakfast place that we used to frequent all the time. And he left, and it was so sad, and I pestered him for 6 months to come and hang out with me and work with us at Franny, and he just has such a vision for it, and it's definitely Euro in its leaning, probably more French in its style at the minute. But he's done this really beautiful job of taking dishes that look quite retro and maybe something that you've seen before. You know, as an example, we've got a vol au vent on the menu at the moment, and you read it and you're like, oh, it's a creamed leek vol au vent. And you're like, yeah, cute, yum. And it comes out and it looks like it, but then you start to eat it, and he does this thing with food where it just blows your mind, and it takes you somewhere that's familiar but with this difference that's layered over the top that just makes you kind of sit up a little bit more in your seat and just have a bit of a think about what you're eating. And I think he does that really well. He balances that really beautiful comfortability with newness and difference, which is really fun. And it's definitely been that theme in the menu a lot. And it's definitely, very Euro, which is kind of how we would describe it mostly.
I would also say there's a real focus on vegetables.
Yes, absolutely. So we have another venue, our first venue, El Planta, which is in South Brisbane. It's a plant-based Mexican restaurant. And we were very mindful coming into a second venue that we have such a loyal and amazing customer base at El Planta that we knew would want to support us in our next venue. And really wanted to make sure that if they wanted to support us again, that they could come into the venue and feel like they were still front of mind and really important in that experience. And so using that decision to kind of lean very heavily into that vegetable kind of category was quite intentional. And then when we originally spoke to Brad and I was talking about kind of the idea for Franny and what we wanted to do, and I was like, ideally it'd be quite vegetable driven. And I think he told me to get stuffed. And he was like, I'm not just doing veg, I'm not doing that. I was like, okay, cool. Fair, no worries. And so we kind of then landed on this, I guess, more of a pescatarian style menu to kind of balance both of our wants and desires off a menu. And I think I'm so glad that we did, because I think it's also really encouraged, particularly from him and the team, a sense of creativity. And I think sometimes on a menu, it's not to take away from anybody else, but, you kind of have that very set structure. It's like something with beef and something with fish and something with chicken. And when you take that away from a menu structure, it really puts a lot of gaps in a menu that you need to fill. And then how do you do that in a way that's still very fun, very approachable and very different, but without that as an option? And I think it's really allowed for them to be super creative and create dishes in a space that's so yummy, and that we know that if you go then down the street, you won't find a dish like that anywhere else. And I think that's also been a really nice point of difference for us at Franny as well, is that you won't eat like you will again in a Brisbane venue. And I think I'm really proud of that, and I'm really proud of him for that.
Adrienne, tell us a bit about yourself. What got you into hospo? Why did you open a plant-based Mexican restaurant? And when you say we, who are we talking about?
So we is me and my partner Rick. I had a quarter life crisis, a few years ago now, which is very sad. But I decided to make salads for restaurants and cafes in Brisbane. And I had a friend who has a cafe, and we would go and it would be lunchtime and the only thing that was in the cabinet was a croissant. And if they didn't have the ability to create food and they didn't have the license or the space, then there was nothing really for them to offer outside of just a pastry. And so I had the idea to make salads for cafes and restaurants, and it blew up. And I think we ended up being in 60 cafes, and Rick and I ourselves were making over a ton of salad a month, delivering and wholesaling out to restaurants and cafes. And where we were doing it was out of an incubator space. So during the day, it would work for artisanal makers, and of an evening, it would kind of almost turn into like a food truck pop-up vibe where you could then sell your product to a mass market of an evening. And they had a gap come up on a Sunday night, and they wanted us to sell our salads of an evening. And I didn't really want to eat salad of an evening. I'm like, if I don't, who will? And I thought that was a really dumb idea. And we loved cooking Mexican at home. And it was always the choice of food that we ate when we cooked. And so then we were like, oh, well, we'll just make tacos. That will be so fine. And then I'd never worked in a kitchen before. And because I don't eat meat, I didn't want to kill people. So I was like, we'll just do veg tacos. That will be really good. Um, and whenever we would go out for Mexican, there was nothing yum for vegetarians. Like, it was okay. But, I just got kind of sick of eating chickpeas on a taco. And I was like, that's just so basic and so sad. And so we kind of just set out to make tacos that we would want to eat if we were going out for dinner, that didn't have meat in them. And so we started one night a week. And I remember looking up YouTube on how to cook in a commercial setting. And I just was watching all of these videos on how to, turn on a commercial stove and how to set a combi oven and how do you chop certain things up that need to be correct, and watched lots of Gordon Ramsay and watched a lot of Mexican YouTube shows in Spanish and tried to identify the ingredients because I don't speak Spanish. And I was like, that's okay, I'll just write what I see and in portions. And we started our planter, and it went from one night a week to this beast. And then all of a sudden we were doing nearly 7 nights a week. And then it got to a point where it had this real cult following, and people would then message us and reserve tacos, because in the space you could only rent the space for a certain amount of time. So before dinner we may only have an hour or two to prep for a full dinner service. And so it meant that the quantities that we could produce were quite minimal. And then, there were times that we would sell out in half an hour or an hour after opening, and then people would get there at 6:30 and they're like, can we order? I'm like, no, we're sold out. And so people then would flood our Instagrams and hold tacos. So there would be all these little buckets of people's names that had reserved tortillas on them, so that we made sure that they didn't miss out. And it grew into this crazy beast that we didn't expect, and it completely overtook our life in the best way possible. And we had a year in the food truck kind of pop-up space, and then we found a bricks and mortar spot just down the road from where we were, and we took the lease on that, and then 2 weeks after COVID hit. So that was a very fun time, but it was an accident. We never really meant to get into it. It was just meant to be a side hustle to make some extra money on a Sunday, and now we have 2 venues. So that's it.
That is an amazing story. I love it. What was your quarter life crisis from? What were you doing? That wasn't the side hustle.
I worked in retail, which I loved, but I really hate my birthday. And then it kind of got to 25 and I was like, oh my God, I'm 25 and just nothing felt cute anymore. I don't know. And so I just woke up one morning, I was like, oh fuck, what am I actually doing with my life? And we've had businesses in the past, and we lived overseas in Thailand. And so Rick and I lived this whole life and this whole journey before coming back to Brisbane. And I don't know, I think I've always wanted to do something different. And I think I get excited by doing that. And I don't know, just something clicked one day and I was like, no, we need a shake up. And yeah, I don't know, the shake up ended up being salads and then a Mexican restaurant and now a wine bar. So yeah.
I'd love for you to talk about Bar Francine, and I love that it's only been open half a year and you're calling her Franny. I love the affection and the connection to this place that you've created. Tell us about the way you manage your team, because that's a really big step. It's one thing to start making salads and to be carried along by this juggernaut of a taco situation, but then to open a restaurant where you need to employ people, it's a pretty serious business. How have you approached it?
I think because we have been so naive to the hospitality industry prior to 4 years ago or 3 years ago, really, when we started. I don't think we came with any baggage or expectation on how it was supposed to be done. And I guess we kind of started treating people the way that we would want to be treated if we were working somewhere. And turns out not every hospo business apparently does that, which blows my mind, and that's a whole other conversation. But I think just by nature, by people, and, you know, we just always care. And I'm a people pleaser at heart. Just always want to make sure that someone's stoked all the time. And so if they're not, it makes me really sad, and I always want to try and find a way to make them stoked on anything that they're doing. And I think that's always been such a core compass of everything that we have done as a business, is always putting the team first and always making sure that they're stoked. And if they are, chances are everything else just works and falls into place. And, you know, Rick and I we know that we are nothing if we don't have a really great group of people around us supporting the vision and supporting the dream. And if we don't want to encourage that and have the best out of them and have their happiness at the core of that, then our dream is nothing. We're never going to be anything that we want to be without them. And I think we have always known that. And I think we've always just wanted to make sure that they've wanted to be a part of the journey. And it's just their happiness that I care about the absolute most. And it's our driver for everything that we've ever done.
So what have you instituted to make sure everyone's stoked all the time?
Lots. They have a list of their favourite things. And so if there's a day that they're not that stoked, chances are something that's their favourite will kind of pop underneath their nose. So depending on who it is, it's a donut, or Dani from Franny loves Messina. And it's a whole, just taking those minutes to hear and listen to what triggers people's happiness. And then I've got a whole book on notes of everything that someone has ever said to me about something, so that I don't forget. And if, you know, they're having a bad day, I'm like, oh, okay, I know last time they loved this and they were talking about how much they loved it when they went out last, and I'll try and get it for them or do something. And we do a profit share with our team. So every 3 months we divvy out 10% of the company's profits amongst everybody as a little extra bonus and a way to say thank you. And I think, you know, we've always said to the team, it's our business. It's everyone's business. Everyone contributes and everyone's important. And I think if you say that, but then you don't show that, then it's not really the truth. And we always try and make sure that if we're telling them that it's our business, that we show them that it's everybody's. And I think the profit share was a really nice way to kind of put our money where our mouth is, so to speak, and to really believe in what we're telling them and believe in what we're saying. And that changed our whole business when we started doing that, because it made them feel like they had a sense of ownership towards something, and then changed a lot of their decision processes along the way. You know, if they were throwing something out, they're like, hang on, wait, that's eating into our profits. We need to change that. It's like, okay, cool. And so that's been a very big change. And particularly at Franny, we now do a 4-day work week with all of the team. No one works more than a 45-hour week in the kitchen, and that's absolute tops. And yeah, I think I ask them if they're happy at least 4 times a day. So, which they get very annoyed at. And I walked into the kitchen the other day, and the boys and Dani in the kitchen had a tally of how many times I asked them if they were happy that day. And I think I asked them 5 times. I was like, well, you know, at least I care. At least I'm asking. So, yeah, I think it's in everything. It's in everything that we do. It's in how we choose to talk to each other. It's in how I choose to show up for them every day, which isn't always perfect, but And just always making sure that what we're saying and what we're doing matches, which I think is really important.
Yeah, it sounds like an incredible culture that you're working to create. I mean, is part of it about like looking after Brisbane as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Brisbane it's such a beautiful city. And I think Brisbane's also in its essence a country town in a big kind of blowout phase, and everyone knows everybody. And I think Brisbane has so much potential still left in it, and so much growth to still happen. And, we really just want to make sure that what we're putting out is to the benefit of that, and to kind of continue to drive that growth and that development, and also to kind of hopefully create venues that people can see themselves spending time in and growing in. And I think that's definitely something that has lacked a lot in Brisbane, is that career hospitality. And a lot of people seek, Sydney and Melbourne or abroad to find that, and they don't necessarily look for it here. And I think it's because, for a lot of it, we haven't had a lot of that growth and that ability to kind of grow within hospitality. And a lot of people have just seen it as that stepping stone, between uni or between jobs or whatever it is. And, we're trying hard to make it a space that you can grow up in and you can live in. And if you want to, you can really create a great life for yourself in it. And we do that with a lot of our core team. Anybody in our team that is a core member has ownership and shares in either business. And again, to really cement that with them, that you've made a decision to have a career in hospitality, and, it shouldn't be Rick and I that are the only people that get some kind of reward out of that. And so that's been a really core decision that Rick and I have made from the beginning, is that if someone like Brad and Chris and MJ from El Planta, they have ownership in what we're doing, and it just makes them feel like they actually have a say in what's happening. And I think for so many businesses, you spend years there and you leave and you have nothing kind of to show for it except for something on a resume. And I think that's sad, because a lot of people put a lot of heart and soul and time and energy into venues and then walk away with nothing to show. And we're trying to change that a little bit too.
It's really interesting, that just a few short years ago, you were very naive about what it meant to run a hospitality business, but you've used that as a positive. Do you feel like an outlier in the hospitality industry? Do you feel like you're blazing a new path? Like, how do you sort of see your place?
I don't really know. I don't know. I don't know if I'm actually 100% honest. I think people know maybe who Rick and I are, but I don't know. Like, I don't really show up and I'm like, oh, hi, I'm Adrienne from Bar Francine. Like, it's just, I don't know. It's just, I think we are very much the people that kind of just sit in silence in the backdrop of everything and just do our own thing and hope that it always works out. But I definitely think I think that the restaurant industry has a lot to answer for how it has treated and sometimes continues to treat its team. And like I remember sitting down with the team at Franny before we opened, and, they wanted to have a hard chat about some non-negotiables that they wanted in their contract. And, Rick and I sat down and, their non-negotiable was that they wanted to sit down and have something to eat that wasn't over a bin, and they would like some kind of fan in the kitchen. And Rick and I would sit there and we would listen to it. And I'm like, what are you talking about? What do you mean? what do you mean you would like a fan in the kitchen? Babe, I'm putting an air-conditioned unit in there in the dish pit for you so it's not so hot in summer. Or, yes, we are going to pencil in an hour to sit down as a team for staff meals. And no, you can't work 80-hour weeks and not get paid for it. And it was all of this kind of discovery, particularly with the second venue and Franny, and hearing people's complaints or issues that they had in the past. And it actually made me so emotional. And I remember walking away from the meeting and I burst into tears and I was so sad. And I turned to Rick and I said, how do people treat people like that? How do you do that to somebody? How do you put someone in a kitchen for 80 hours a week and only pay them for 38? How do you not give them dinner? How do you not say thank you? I remember I told the boys at Franny that I was really proud of them and I gave them a hug and they didn't know what to do with themselves because no one had told them that they were proud of them before. And it just, I think, if we want people to stay, and businesses don't want big turnarounds of their staff and they want team that care, then you need to care about them first. And I think that's been such a gap. And that's not to say everybody does it, but I think there's a big part of people that have stopped remembering that if they don't have a team, then they don't have a business. And I think people always put their customer first, and the customer is super important. But your customer can't sit or eat if you don't have a team to feed them or to serve them. And I think people have sometimes skewed the importance of team a little bit. And I think that's something that Rick and I are trying to change, and something that was so big when we took Franny. A lot of the team that are at Franny had left hospitality. Brad had left, Chris was about to leave, Dani was about to leave, and they were these just such talented people that were going to leave an industry that were begging to have them because they were so upset with something that had happened in the past that made them not want to continue to do it. And I think, for everything that we try and do, it's at the core of their happiness, so that at the very minimum, we don't lose talented people to this industry that everyone's screaming to have. And I think that's really important. And I think as an owner of any business, that needs to be something that you're always thinking about.
Tell me about some of these staff meals, Adrienne. Like, what is the vibe? What do you guys sit down and eat?
Friggin' delicious. They're so yummy. The guys do the best one. We make the joke, I always rate staff meals and tell them if it's the best one yet. And so I'm always chuffed that there's food on my plate, so I don't really care what's in front of me. But I don't know, the other day Jack made this banging whole cauliflower with this hummus base and this Middle Eastern kind of ottolini style salad. We do fish burgers. We've had, I don't know, everything, curries, and we've had fancy grilled swordfish and salad for a healthy staff meal. And we do Brinner every Friday, which is my absolute favourite. And it's a nice time to kind of all sit down together before service and just chat and catch up on how everybody's day is going. And it's very lovely. And then, it's so nice. And it's so nice to be able to do that daily with them. And I very much appreciate it. It's the highlight of my whole day.
So good. Adrienne, amazing to talk to you. I just have even more appreciation for my experience at Bar Francine and a little bit more insight into why it just felt so good in the room. Just a really beautiful, wholesome, heartfelt dinner that I had there. I really appreciated the creativity in the food and the vibe, and I now know what underpins that. So thank you so much for sharing with us today, and congratulations on what you're continuing to create.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thanks for letting me be part of it. I was stoked to get your email, so very happy.
Well, I know you're all about being stoked all the time, so I'm glad to bring a little bit of stoked into your life.
just like to be stoked all the time. It's like a happy little chihuahua.
Thanks, Adrienne.
No worries. See ya.
This is Dirty Linen, and I'm Dani Valent. We air the issues that the hospitality industry finds hard to talk about, hearing from different people with unique perspectives. We want to hear from you as well. If you have something that needs to be said about a topic, get in touch so we can include your perspective. Contact us at dirtyLinen@deepintheweeds.com.au or hit us up on Insta at Dirty Linen Podcast. We can't wait to hear from you.
This